Welcome to the 4Cs podcast for SAP Business One, brought to you by Third Wave Business Systems. I'm Mike Hamm, and my colleague Tyson McMurren, bringing you a podcast that takes a deeper dive into the ERP system that is SAP Business One. We'll be hosting product experts and members of the Business One community, helping you, a Business One user, get the most out of SAP Business One.
All right. Thank you and welcome to episode 3. We've been getting a lot of questions after episode 1 and 2. What are the 4 C's? So this episode, Tyson and I are going to dive in to just what those 4 C's are. Happy to be here and happy to present this. I think this is one of the most important episodes, and we'll just dive right in here. Tyson, let's talk about the topics discussed and what are the 4 C's?
Yeah, Mike, the 4 C's came about from us having some internal discussions in regards to, what is it that our customers are looking to solve, and what are the customers that are, truly successfully implemented and fully using SAP Business One from the capabilities. And we started to really kind of dive into it, and we realized that it's more than just the ERP solution. It came down to 4 elements, and you've heard of the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And what we kind of realized is that if you focus on the 4 C's within your business, you're truly going to have a connected enterprise. And those 4 C's are, the core system being SAP Business One, connecting to anything that's outside of SAP Business One, communication, streamlining the communication between internal and external parties, and making sure that you have full control over everything within your processes.
That's a really great overview, and that's something that I noticed too, separately. But before I joined Third Wave in running the Biz One conference, is we would get, these super users, right, so to speak, to speak at the conference. These customers who just, like you talked about, really had a grasp on not just, implementing Business One, but running their business through Business One. And that's, connecting your ERP system, connecting the CRM system, really making Business One the center of the organization, right? The single source of truth, so that everyone's working and communicating out of the same system. And that allows for tremendous success across the organization, inside and out, right? Because, suppliers can interact with you more accurately based on that real-time data. And that's, something that drew me to Third Wave too, was how, the sessions and your guys' customers in particular really seem to have a grasp on that strategy, that, seeing the ERP system as a bigger picture, right, as a real life cycle and an ecosystem to how to grow and change, their business.
Within the core of SAP Business One, having SAP Business One as a system really kind of helps you with keeping everything straight. So, your accounts receivable, your accounts payable, your inventory systems, your GL, your, managing your bank account, all of those things, within the core of SAP Business One are really nice. And we at Third Wave have built some tools that kind of expand out the core of the system. And I don't want this to be a commercial about Third Wave products, but it's really around thinking about your processes within the core system and looking at where areas can be automated or streamlined within that. And that's where we at Third Wave focus. So the core system, knowing how SAP Business One works, making sure that is the source of all of your key business information, and being able to have all of the information in the core system in real time is ultimately the objective. And that is where you need the other C's.
You talk about the core being, your one source of truth, right? And if you're really going to make it that, what you connect to that, you can't operate in silos anymore, right? What you connect to that, not every business is going to need an e-commerce platform. And maybe not every business is going to need a CRM system. But when you implement those, and if your business implements those have got to tie back to your core, right? Your Business One system, and talk about the importance of what you connect, right? And how that connection's set up. Because I think a lot of people will, get Business One and think, okay, I have my ERP system, and now I have, this add-on over here, or I have this program over there. And that's when folks really start to get in the weeds, because now you got folks operating in different areas. Talk about the importance of Connect there.
Yeah. So Connect is really simplifying a lot of different things, and you touched on a couple of them being, we need to connect to other systems that are outside of Business One, and making sure that we're streamlining the flow of information between them. So in e-commerce, and we episode 2, we talked about e-commerce and how we connect and how we flow information back and forth between the two systems, and how you're in control of all of that. But Connect comes down to, there's buzzwords out there like IoT, Industry 4.0, all of these buzzwords. They talk about ultimately Connect, which is, I have a scale that I weigh my items before I ship them out, or I have a scale that I weigh items as I'm putting them into a production order. Why can't I connect that scale to an interface so that I don't have to write it down on a clipboard and then turn it in to the office? Connecting to your shipping systems, connecting to your 3PL, connecting to your expense management systems. These connections are everywhere. And again, you mentioned it. They're unique to every business, because not every business that runs SAP Business One sells, soup cans. And in your past, I'm sure you saw it, because it's amazing the types of businesses that are running on SAP Business One, and the different industries that are in that space is incredible.
Oh yeah, the sheer variety was really what made me most excited about this space, right? As you meet customers, it's not like Business One is an ERP system for manufacturers, right? There are so many different businesses, and something you said really struck me is Connect, right? These are guidelines in the sense that this is the kind of state of mind you got to go into when running your organization with Business One. You have to look at everything through this lens of Connect. Just what you said there, when you're weighing everything on the scale before that, right in and of itself. If you look at everything through that lens of what are the things that are producing data for me, data that I need to act on, I need to look at that through that lens of Connect. How can I tie this data source to the core? And if you look at everything across your organization like that, and you're tying everything back to Business One, everyone's going to have access to that information. Everyone's going to be able to make actionable insights based on that data, because you're going across the organization, tying everything back. That's what this is about, right? We're not talking about very specific things or best practices here. You should tie XYZ back. It's the frame of mind you need to be in when you have an SAP Business One, because it is so, it is so vast, how many different industries, and this is how it applies to everyone, right?
Right. And we'll talk more about the opportunity. So let's go into the next C.
Communicate.
So this is where, when you start implementing SAP Business One, it's like, can I export this to Excel? Can I send this as an email. And we know in Business One, there's even the ability to send a fax. But ultimately what communicate means is when events happen in the system, we need to be able to communicate that to the parties that know that happens. Now, whether that's in a designed workflow when there's a trigger event that's happened, but ultimately what communicate really embraces is, and you talked about it a little bit in Connect, which is if we have this information available in a more real-time fashion, now the communication between that data and the interaction between that data becomes a lot more streamlined, because now we can share that information across the organization or to external parties in a lot faster manner. And because we trust the core system, we know that information and we know that those workflows are in tune, and that's where you can shave a bunch of time and effort around working in Excel or working in. We had a client that was literally printing out an Excel spreadsheet, faxing it over to another third party. The third party then would highlight lines on that fax and then fax it back to have a user key that information into the spreadsheet again.
Unbelievable. And that's what we're talking about, right? How we can make all that data that we just tied back, right? All the things that we connected back. Now how do we use this? And how did not just we in our organization? That's a really great point, because sometimes we get the blinders on. We want to think, that's our system. That's our Business One system. We need to make sure our internal staff. You can benefit greatly by having that data and that actionable real-time insight accessible to suppliers and customers and things like that. If you tie the systems back correctly, how do we use this to communicate with one another, right? That's what this is about.
And that's where, it's not necessarily email. Maybe it's sending a Teams message. Maybe it's sending a text message. Maybe it's just putting that information available on a portal platform somewhere for another person to have that access to that information. So instead of, printing out the Excel spreadsheet and faxing it, just giving the user the ability to log on and interact with that data on a portal platform. And again, I'm not solving problems here. I'm trying to help the audience, really understand what the 4 C's are and to kind of help them think about things. But one of the big objections that we get, Mike, in regards to streamlining connections and streamlining communication is really around making sure that everything's in control, and that's our next C.
And that was a great transition when you mentioned access. When I talked about access to the Business One system and those outside of organization, you brought up a couple different ways that people might not think of how, when we talk about access to the Business One system outside of our organization, right? There's a lot of different ways to do that. There's, like you mentioned, the portal platforms, and that all comes down to control, right? Control of your data, control of who has access, of what changes to be made. Talk more about how you can control, so to speak, that control of your core and of your information.
Yeah, so I'm a CPA, CMA, so management accountant, and control is my number one focus when looking at business processes, and it's really around internal controls, so making sure that you have separation of duties, making sure that the processes have predictable results, but really what it comes down to is ensuring that your data is accurate.
Yep.
Making sure that the processes and workflows are flowing the way that the information is supposed to flow. Yep. Making sure that you have approvals and alerts and the ability to have stop points within things, because as things become instantaneous, digitization's great, but really making sure that that information is accurate, making sure that the processes, so for example, if we're doing a check run or an EFT run, and the person that's doing the payment run isn't the person that's sending the bank files, and making sure that the invoices that are in that payment run are approved. So making sure that you have stop points and the ability to have things that validate information, having tools that allow you to have limited access to information. So for example, you talked about connecting to a supplier. Well, you certainly wouldn't want that supplier knowing who else you buy that item from. Or maybe you don't want the supplier to know who your key customers are. So making sure that the information that you're providing to these other parties is truly locked down, and the access to that information is limited to what's in the workflow. And I've said workflow a few times, Mike, and one of the big things, because the 4 C's is really this broad topic, and again, I said there's lots of different use cases for Connect. There's lots of different ways that you can use Business One in different types of industries, and there's lots of different ways that we can communicate within the organization or external to the organization. And what I want next to do is to talk in regards to one of the questions that we got, Mike, which is, how do I identify these areas, and where do I start? And that's where looking at tools, and I've mentioned portal platform, automation as some of the examples, and automation really comes down to streamlining and using some of the Connect tools, and using some of the things within SAP Business One to do things. But what I recommend as a good starting point to looking at your business is to really kind of step back and kind of rise above and go, what's the overall objective of what we're trying to do here, and thinking about where in my organization are these things that we're doing really not non-value add, but they're key to the business process that you currently have, and how do we rise up above that and look at the business processes and streamline them, and how do I find tools to do that? So one of the things that we recommend doing is looking at your business. And I recently did a webinar, Mike, called The Essential Elements of the Connected Enterprise. So maybe in the show notes you can put a link to that. But I talked about some of the tools that you can use to do this, like looking at your business model, looking at different processes, and using a RASCI method in order to, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's contributing, who's informed, looking at the process from a analytical standpoint in regards to asking the questions around, what within that process, and who needs to approve things, and those types of things becomes important. But one of the big things that I recommend is looking at your current processes and mapping them out into what we call a swim lane. So if you want to bring up the swim lane analysis for the audience that's on YouTube, we can kind of just talk through some examples of that, Mike.
Yep.
This swim lane analysis is an example of an SAP Business One customer that wants to get a signature from the customer when they deliver an item, and they then send out an invoice. And this looks pretty typical, Mike. You've talked with a lot of SAP Business One customers, and you get a phone call from the client or an email, and somebody within the organization enters a sales order in SAP Business One. Then a pick list gets generated, or the order gets printed off, and somebody goes and gets the items. The delivery driver comes in and picks up their items that might be in a bin or in an area within the warehouse. They grab the paperwork that's associated with that. They spend a bunch of time, making sure that they have everything. They look at the paperwork. They drive to the customer site. They then, have their piece of paper, and they get the customer to sign off on their piece of paper. And maybe they leave a delivery document with the customer as well. Somewhere in the process they turn in paperwork. So if they're doing a route and they're doing a cross-state delivery route, that paperwork might get faxed in overnight from the hotel that they're staying in, or it's going to sit in the truck until the driver comes back to the warehouse, and then it gets turned in to the accounts receivable department, or the team. And then at that point, an invoice is going to get generated. The invoice gets mailed. Somebody reviews and pays those invoices at the customer site. A check gets mailed back, and an incoming payment gets processed in Business One. And then, and then there's the whole process in regards to, reconciling and doing your bank deposit and all of that from a banking perspective. But this process doesn't look that broken, does it, Mike? There's control.
Yep.
There's validation within it. But
it's a lot of steps, right?
Well,
it's a lot of hands, and it looks like a lot of touch points and time.
Touches and time. That's a good point. And really, what we want to do is accelerate the order to cash, right? So how do we look at this process objectively, and how do we take the 4 C's into consideration and look at ways that we can automate this? Well, if you just go to the next slide for the YouTube audience, and for the listening audience, I'll just kind of step you through this. So what if we gave the customer a portal that they could place that order? Or maybe we can get that order through a B2B e-commerce, or maybe we can get that from our e-commerce site. And we can automate the entry of that through Connect, so that order's in SAP Business One once the order's placed. So now we've freed up the salesperson from entering in the information. We now have dealt with maybe one of the reasons that items were being returned, which is because, well, that's not what I ordered, because somebody miskeyed the order when they were keying the order in from the phone order, or from the email order that came in. And then we can send an email validation that, we got your order. We can have the driver view the orders on a digital tablet, or their phone, or a computer. And they can even, look at the address, look at the items. They can send a notice to the customer that they're on the way. And then they can, validate the items as they're unloading. The customer can then, confirm the delivery and sign off. And we can create the delivery and invoice in Business One in real time. The customer can then go on to a portal and process a payment and send an e-transfer or send a credit card payment. We can have a payment gateway that does all the validation of all the, the electronic funds and the credit card information, and we can create the incoming payment in SAP Business One. What have we done? Well, we've streamlined 2 people within the organization, because the sales department now can focus on more important things like educating customers on new products, and spending more time talking about talking about the products and talking about the value of the products versus, taking orders. The accounts receivable department can now focus on, more important things like collections and looking into, cash flow trends and looking into order trends and all of the things that are, value add within the organization versus, just keying information. Because what we've done is we've automated through our Connect, everything. And if you look at this, or, if you think about this process, everything's still in control because we still have the sign off. We still have, the touch points for the customer to validate things. But everything's now streamlined. Everything now is a lot more real time. And we've also communicated with the customer throughout the process.
And so we've covered, what the 4 C's are. They're in a sense a way to look at your organization, right? Guidelines that any organization using Business One can follow, right? I think that's the most important thing about the 4 C's, is how applicable they are universally to those using Business One, because we talk about the importance of connect and the importance of identifying areas to connect. And then we talk about the importance of how communication through those connections is important. And then to top it all off, we talk about how you're going to control the connections, the communications, and everything involved in that process of tying it back to the core. And then we also finished up with, how to prioritize and identify how to make those connections and how to properly utilize the communication and everything back to the core. I think that's extremely helpful to any business using Business One. And you mentioned, we have a couple, specific tools and analyses and opportunities that allow you as a Business One customer to step back and look at your organization through fresh eyes, right? How do I identify? I mean, there were just so many examples throughout that we touched upon that were really, it's like, I was operating in a silo here and I didn't even realize that was a redundant touch point, right? Where a customer places an order with my sales rep when I can empower, the customer in this fashion, or I can, empower this area of the organization.
Yeah, and you touched on it. No situation is too trivial, Mike.
No.
They all are processes within, your organization. And when you're looking at these, the other thing is, what's the cost of the disconnection, right? Like, is it time? Is it money?
Yep.
Or is it morale, right? Because sometimes it's not just the money aspect of it. It's really around, the time that it's taking, or the morale of the organization, where it's like, oh yeah, I gotta do my month-end expense report.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
Well, what if you just, in real time took a photo of your expense and categorized it and it's done in real time? Yeah. Simple stuff like that. And that's where morale and time and money and all those things, and you touched on it. No situation is really a trivial workflow to ignore, because all the information that's flowing within your organization is critical to the success of your organization. So get it out of the silos, share it across your enterprise, and if you do that, you're going to be that much more ahead of your competition.
Yep. No, I think that's a good place to end it too, right? I think we've really covered it and help folks really see this through a different way, and that's what this is all about, right? That's why you come here. That's why you digest the content, to see something differently that's been right in front of you. That's actionable, right? And I think the 4 C's allow any organization using Business One to do that.
Yeah.
Want to thank you, Tyson. Thank you for the time. Thank you for walking us through swim lane analysis. Thank you for, identifying areas that are often overlooked. Appreciate the time as always.
Right on. Well, everybody have a great week or weeks, and stay safe and stay connected.